Question 1. Why is it critical for a dispatcher to ensure the aircraft's HF communication system is fully functional before an oceanic flight, particularly when CPDLC is also available? Because CPDLC is optional and HF is the primary method for distress communication in oceanic sectors. B. Because HF is used for backup communications only and CPDLC covers all data and voice communication needs. C. Because aircraft are not allowed to enter oceanic airspace without SATCOM backup. D. Because VHF is still the required standard for all high-altitude airspace, even over oceans. Correct answer. Because CPDLC is optional and HF is the primary method for distress communication in oceanic sectors. Explanation. In oceanic airspace where there is no radar coverage and limited VHF range, high-frequency HF communication is the primary backup system for voice communication, particularly for emergencies. Although CPDLC controller, pilot data link communications, allows for digital messaging between pilots and controllers, it is not a substitute for HF when it comes to distress and urgency situations. ICAO Annex 10 Volume II and FAA AC 9117 clearly emphasize that aircraft operating beyond VHF coverage must have reliable long-range communication like HF. This ensures the aircraft can report positions, receive clearances, and handle emergencies. SATCOM can supplement but not universally replace HF, as many regions still rely on HF voice. Question 2. What is the primary consideration when deciding whether to divert an aircraft due to a pressurization failure during cruise? A remaining fuel and the distance to the nearest ETOPS alternate. B. The aircraft's altitude and ability to descend to a safe breathable level within drift-down constraints. C. Cabin altitude and the passenger's oxygen supply limitations. D. The loss of communication ability due to system failure during the pressurization issue. Correct answer. C. Cabin altitude and the passenger's oxygen supply limitations. Explanation. A loss of pressurization leads to an immediate increase in cabin altitude. At altitudes above 10,000 feet, supplemental oxygen becomes necessary, and above 14,000 feet, regulations mandate it be provided. FAA regulations under FAR Part 121.333 stipulate time of use limitations for oxygen masks, typically 12-22 minutes. This time is meant to allow the aircraft to descend to 10,000 feet where oxygen is no longer needed. If that window is exceeded, the risk to passenger safety increases significantly. Thus, the most critical factor is the ability to descend and stabilize the cabin altitude within that time, not just fuel or alternate proximity. Question 3. Ms. Garcia is a licensed dispatcher overseeing Flight XR-120, a transatlantic route from New York to Madrid using a twin-engine ETOPS-certified aircraft. 2 hours into flight, the aircraft experiences an engine oil pressure drop. Although the engine is still operating within limits, the captain and Ms. Garcia agree to review diversion options. Weather conditions at the planned ETOPS alternate have deteriorated below landing minimums. Fuel reserves are sufficient for a diversion, but the only viable alternate now is 90 minutes further away. What should Ms. Garcia do in this situation? A. Continue with the original ETOPS alternate, as fuel was already planned with reserves. B. Request the flight return to the departure airport due to updated weather. C. Coordinate with the captain to divert to the newly suitable alternate and update dispatch release. D. Wait for the weather to improve before making a diversion decision. Correct answer. C. Coordinate with the captain to divert to the newly suitable alternate and update dispatch release. Explanation. ETOPS Extended Range Twin-Engine Operational Performance Standards. Operations require that suitable alternate airports be available within the aircraft's certified diversion time, based on engine-out scenarios. In this scenario, the original alternate is now below minimums, violating the requirement for an adequate alternate. ICAO Annex 6 Part I and FAA AC 12042 B require that the aircraft always remain within diversion range to a suitable alternate. Dispatch must coordinate with the PIC to identify the new suitable alternate and legally update the dispatch release. Waiting is not compliant with regulations, and returning to the origin may not be efficient or necessary if another alternate is suitable and within ETOPS range. Question 4. Which of the following best explains the importance of SELCAL in transoceanic operations? It replaces all need for manual HF radio monitoring during flight. B. It allows air traffic control to send voice messages directly to FMS. C. It alerts the crew of an incoming HF communication, reducing the need for constant monitoring. D. It is used for data link messaging in place of CPDLC. Correct answer. C. It alerts the crew of an incoming HF communication, reducing the need for constant monitoring. Explanation. SELCAL, selective calling, is a valuable system that alerts pilots when a ground station wants to initiate communication over HF or VHF. This reduces crew workload on long flights where HF monitoring is required but extremely fatiguing. SELCAL tones trigger a chime in the cockpit, allowing the crew to turn up the HF radio volume for that message only. ICAO Annex 10 recommends SELCAL usage in oceanic operations. It doesn't transmit data or replace CPDLC. It's strictly an alerting system. CPDLC handles digital communications, while SELCAL applies to voice HF-VHF. Question 5. Which of the following statements best describes the dispatcher's legal role in an emergency scenario involving an engine shutdown in flight? The dispatcher must issue a reroute without captain consultation. B. The dispatcher must defer all decisions to the PIC per FAA Part 121. C. The dispatcher shares joint responsibility with the PIC to ensure safety and must assist in identifying diversion options. D. The dispatcher has no authority during an emergency and only logs events for reporting. Correct answer. C. The dispatcher shares joint responsibility with the PIC to ensure safety and must assist in identifying diversion options. Explanation. Under 14 CFR Part 121.533, dispatchers have joint operational control with the PIC. This means the dispatcher must remain involved throughout the flight, especially during emergencies. Their role includes monitoring, analyzing the situation, evaluating fuel and alternate options, and communicating with the captain to ensure a safe outcome. Dispatchers cannot act unilaterally, nor can they ignore their duty by deferring all authority. FAA guidance emphasizes that this joint responsibility applies during abnormal and emergency conditions alike. Question 6. Mr. Lee is dispatching a flight from Miami to Bogota. The aircraft is a narrow-body jet with no ETOPS certification. En route, ATC mandates a reroute due to volcanic ash activity, increasing the trip length by 180 nm. The fuel onboard includes trip fuel, contingency, alternate fuel, and final reserve. But after the reroute, the contingency fuel drops below 3% of the new trip fuel requirement. What should Mr. Lee do to ensure regulatory compliance and safety? Allow the flight to continue, since final reserve fuel is still intact. B. Inform the captain and consider redispatch to a closer destination. C. Do nothing unless fuel falls below minimum landing fuel. D. Instruct the flight to hold and burn fuel to get back within planned parameters. Correct answer. B. Inform the captain and consider redispatch to a closer destination. Explanation: redispatch, or reclearance, is a legal method under FAA AC 12047A and ICAO Annex 6 to change flight destination mid-flight. If contingency fuel falls below regulatory thresholds, typically 5% of trip fuel or a fixed time buffer, depending on the region, it may indicate the flight can no longer safely reach its original destination. In such cases, the dispatcher must evaluate alternate options and potentially initiate a redispatch to an intermediate airport. It is not appropriate to continue without review, nor is burning fuel in a hold acceptable if it worsens the situation. Question 7. Which of the following best represents the difference between CPDLC and ACARS in dispatch communications? ACARS is used only for performance data, while CPDLC handles clearances. B. CPDLC is a proprietary airline communication, while ACARS is regulated by ICAO. C. CPDLC is used for air traffic control communication. ACARS is used for airline operational communication. D. There is no difference. Both systems operate on the same protocol and function. Correct answer: C. CPDLC is used for air traffic control communication. ACARS is used for airline operational communication. Explanation: while both CPDLC and ACARS use digital data links, their functions differ. ACARS, Aircraft Communications Addressing and Reporting System, is primarily used for operational control, like sending out-of-limit reports, flight plan updates, and performance data between the aircraft and dispatcher. CPDLC, Controller, Pilot Data Link Communications, is strictly for communicating between ATC and pilots, handling altitude changes, route deviations, and oceanic clearances. According to ICAO Doc 4444 and FAA Datacom programs, this distinction is essential for operational planning and understanding roles. Question 8. During fuel dumping operations, what is the most important environmental and operational consideration a dispatcher must verify before advising the flight to proceed? That the aircraft is at cruise altitude to ensure full burn-off of dumped fuel. B. That fuel dumping occurs over populated areas to allow for quicker ATC coordination. C. That fuel dumping occurs above a minimum altitude and away from congested areas or protected zones. D. That fuel dumping happens at low altitude to reduce atmospheric dispersion. Correct answer: C. That fuel dumping occurs above a minimum altitude and away from congested areas or protected zones. Explanation: fuel dumping is regulated under FAA Order 7110.65 and ICAO environmental guidelines. Dumping must be done at a safe altitude, usually above 6,000 ft/AGL, and away from populated or environmentally sensitive areas to avoid harm to people and ecosystems. ATC must be informed and involved, and specific dumping zones may be designated. Dispatchers must coordinate closely with ATC and the flight crew to ensure these procedures are followed, especially when time-critical descent or landing is needed. Question 9. Ms. Roberts is planning a flight from Frankfurt to Cairo. A series of NOTAMs just issued indicates the airspace over part of Eastern Europe is closed due to military exercises. The current routing goes directly through the affected airspace. Rerouting would add 250 nm and require an alternate airport change due to range limits. What should Ms. Roberts consider the highest priority when planning the new routing? Ensuring that the new route avoids the closed airspace, even if it exceeds fuel reserves. B. Finding a route that maintains access to suitable alternates and remains compliant with fuel reserve regulations. C. Filing the original route and relying on ATC for in-flight reroutes. D. Disregarding the NOTAMs, unless explicitly banned by ICAO. Correct answer. B. Finding a route that maintains access to suitable alternates and remains compliant with fuel reserve regulations. Explanation. Dispatchers must comply with NOTAMs, Notice to Air Missions, and airspace restrictions. Ignoring these can violate ICAO Annex 15 and FAA FAR 121.593. However, compliance must also include fuel planning and alternate airport accessibility. Any reroute must ensure the aircraft remains within fuel and alternate planning limits. Overextending fuel range to avoid airspace would violate dispatch regulations, while relying solely on ATC for reroutes shifts operational control away from the dispatcher, which is non-compliant. Question 10. Which weather product provides real-time turbulence information derived from aircraft sensors and is most useful for en route operational updates? A. METAR. B. ARMET. C. PIREP. D. SIGWX chart. Correct answer, C. PIREP. Explanation. Pilot reports, PIREPs, are essential for dispatchers and pilots to assess actual flight conditions. PIREPs include turbulence, icing, and cloud tops, especially valuable when derived from automated sensors onboard aircraft, e.g., AMDAR or ACARS turbulence reports. They reflect current atmospheric conditions, unlike AIRMETs and SIGMETs, which are forecasts. METARs are surface observations. Dispatchers monitor PIREPs closely, especially when rerouting around turbulence zones. ICAO Annex 3 and FAA AC-45H emphasize PIREPs' operational importance. Question 11. When planning a domestic IFR flight under FAR Part 121, which condition requires an alternate airport to be listed on the dispatch release? A. The cruise altitude is above FL 300. B. The flight is over water for more than 100 nm. C. The destination weather is forecast below 2000 ft ceiling and or 3 sm visibility plus or minus 1 hour of ETA. D. The flight duration exceeds 90 minutes. Correct answer. C. The destination weather is forecast below 2000 ft ceiling and or 3 sm visibility plus or minus 1 hour of ETA. Explanation. This is the 123 rule from 14 CFR Section 121, 619. An alternate is required if 1 hour before to 1 hour after the estimated time of arrival, the forecast weather is below 2,000 feet ceiling or 3 statute miles visibility. This ensures that if conditions deteriorate, a legal and suitable alternate exists. Flight duration, altitude, or distance over water do not independently mandate alternates under domestic IFR rules. Question 12. A flight is planned from Dallas-Fort Worth, DFW, to Minneapolis, MSB. The TAF for MSB at ETA shows OVC 008 2 SMBR, but a conditional tempo group shows improvement to BKN 015 4 SM. Based on FAR Part 121 requirements, should the dispatcher plan for an alternate airport? A. No, because tempo groups indicate temporary improvements. B. Yes, because the worst weather condition in the TAF must be considered. C. No, because 123 rule doesn't apply when tempo groups show VFR. D. Yes, only if the flight is operated under VFR. Correct answer. B. Yes, because the worst weather condition in the TAF must be considered. Explanation. Per FAA AC-45H and FAR 121.619, a dispatcher must consider the worst prevailing condition, including tempo or prob groups, within plus or minus 1 hour of ETA when determining alternate needs. even though conditions may improve temporarily. If they are forecast to fall below the 1-2-3 rule during any part of the window, an alternate is required. The overcast at 800 ft and visibility of 2 sm clearly fail the test. Question 13. Which type of navigation aid is mandatory for dispatchers to verify availability for RNAV-dependent routing under Part 121? A. Only ILS equipment. B. GPS and ground-based VORDME infrastructure. C. TACAN availability along all airways. D. Non-directional beacons, NDBs only. Correct answer: B. GPS and ground-based VORDME infrastructure. Explanation: when dispatching RNAV flights under Part 121, availability of GPS signals or fallback to ground-based infrastructure, VORDME, must be considered. FAA AC 9100A outlines operational use of RNAV and requires dispatchers to check NOTAMs, RAIM predictions, or navigation system NOTAMs to ensure navigation reliability. TACANs and NDBs are rarely part of modern RNAV en route navigation and are not primary considerations. Question 14. When determining takeoff performance for a wet runway, which factor most significantly affects the V1 decision speed? A. The headwind component. B. The aircraft's weight only. C. The runway slope only. D. Accelerate stop distance and runway surface condition. Correct answer: D. Accelerate stop distance and runway surface condition. Explanation: V1 is the critical decision speed for continuing or aborting takeoff. On wet or contaminated runways, accelerate stop distance is extended, affecting V1. If stopping distance increases, V1 may be reduced to allow room to stop safely in case of an abort. Runway surface condition reports RSC, braking action, and runway slope, if applicable, feed into these calculations. FAA AC 12090, and performance software such as RTOW modules account for these in dispatch. Question 15. An aircraft on an oceanic flight from New York to London loses contact with Gander radio on HF and attempts to use CPDLC, but no response is received for 10 minutes. The pilot contacts dispatch via ACARS. What should the dispatcher do first? A. Advise the flight to turn around to the previous domestic fur. B. Contact Gander radio directly to relay position and request assistance. C. Instruct the pilot to descend to regain VHF range. D. Wait until the aircraft calls back after 20 minutes. Correct answer: B. Contact Gander radio directly to relay position and request assistance. Explanation: dispatchers must support aircraft communication gaps in oceanic airspace. If HF and CPDLC fail, per ICAO Doc 4444 and FAA NAT Doc 7, North Atlantic Ops Manual, dispatchers act as relays. The correct action is to contact the OCA, Gander in this case, directly and provide the aircraft's position and intentions. Turning back or descending could violate separation or worsen the issue. This is a core part of operational control responsibilities under FAR 121. Question 16. Under FAR 121, what must be included in the minimum fuel supply for a domestic flight? A. Trip fuel only. B. Trip fuel plus fuel to alternate only. C. Trip fuel, alternate fuel if required, and 45 minutes at normal cruising consumption. D. Trip fuel plus 10% reserve of total block fuel. Correct answer: C. Trip fuel, alternate fuel if required, and 45 minutes at normal cruising consumption. Explanation: per 14 CFR 121.639, dispatchers must ensure domestic flights carry fuel to reach the destination, fuel to fly to the most distant alternate if required, and fuel to fly for 45 minutes at normal cruise. International rules may vary, but under domestic ops, this is the minimum standard. The 10% rule is used in some international contexts, e.g., ICAO EASA rules, but not in FAA Part 121. Question 17. What is the primary dispatcher responsibility during an in-flight security threat, e.g., bomb threat or hijacking? A coordinate with FBI to advise the pilot on negotiation. B. Contact the airline SOC and security response team for coordinated response. C. Instruct the pilot to descend and divert immediately. D. Communicate with passengers through ACARS to maintain calm. Correct answer. B. Contact the airline SOC and security response team for coordinated response. Explanation. Dispatchers must follow airline security protocols, which include immediate contact with the Security Operations Center (SOC) and emergency response plans (ERP). They should never advise specific security tactics to the flight crew. This is coordinated with FAA, TSA, and law enforcement. Per FAA security FARs, e.g., 49 CFR 1544, dispatchers act as the liaison, relaying information and ensuring compliance with pre-established procedures. Question 18. Which condition would prevent the use of a preferred IFR route during flight planning under Part 121? A. The route crosses multiple ARTCC boundaries. B. An en route waypoint is temporarily closed via NOTAM. C. The flight occurs during nighttime hours. D. The route is longer than the direct route by 100 nm. Correct answer. B. An en route waypoint is temporarily closed via NOTAM. Explanation. Preferred IFR routes, published in FAA notices and the chart supplement, are designed to ease ATC workload and provide efficiency. However, if any fix, waypoint, or navigate along the route is unavailable due to a NOTAM, the dispatcher must reroute the flight. Safety and legality take precedence. Crossing multiple ARTCCs or being longer in distance is not disqualifying, and time of day isn't a factor unless tied to a specific ATC flow restriction. Question 19. If an aircraft reports a dual generator failure while en route, what is the most appropriate dispatcher action? A. Advise the crew to continue as normal, since one APU can power essential systems. B. Suggest the crew declare minimum fuel and prioritize their arrival. C. Coordinate with ATC and recommend the nearest suitable diversion airport. D. File an amendment to the dispatch release with a different route. Correct answer. C. Coordinate with ATC and recommend the nearest suitable diversion airport. Explanation. A dual generator failure significantly limits aircraft systems, especially if batteries are relied upon. Dispatchers must treat this as an in-flight emergency per FAR 121.603 and 121.631 and help initiate diversion to the nearest suitable airport that meets landing requirements. Filing a revised route or ignoring the issue violates operational control responsibilities and safety regulations. Question 20. A flight is operating from Miami, MIA to Lima, Peru, LIM, under Part 121 International Rules. The alternate airport listed is Quito, Ecuador, UIO. En route, a tropical storm diverts traffic in the Lima FIR. What should the dispatcher do immediately? A. Notify FAA ATC and request a reroute via domestic ARTCCs. B. Contact the crew and initiate a diversion plan, coordinating with LIM and UIO ATC units. C. Update the alternate to a U.S. domestic airport for quicker access. D. Have the aircraft enter a holding pattern to wait out the storm. Correct answer. B. Contact the crew and initiate a diversion plan, coordinating with LIM and UIO ATC units. Explanation: under 14 CFR 121.631 and ICAO Annex 6, dispatchers are jointly responsible for safety of international operations. If weather or airspace restrictions jeopardize arrival, alternate planning must be activated immediately. Communicating with local ATC and international dispatch contacts ensures proper clearance and sequencing. Holding in storm proximity or rerouting to a domestic airport may not be feasible or safe. Question 21. What is the dispatcher's responsibility concerning aircraft weight and balance under FAR Part 121? A. Reviewing pilot's load sheet for boarding compliance. B. Ensuring maximum landing weight is within limits at the destination. C. Confirming that center of gravity is forward of the neutral point. D. Ensuring cargo is loaded by the airport station per company SOP. Correct answer: B. Ensuring maximum landing weight is within limits at the destination. Explanation: while actual loading is the crew and ramp's responsibility, the dispatcher must ensure projected landing weight does not exceed the aircraft's maximum landing weight, MLW, factoring in fuel burn, payload, and possible alternates diversions. FAR 121.135 and AC 120.27F emphasize dispatcher oversight of weight and balance planning, not direct loading. CG and exact load distribution are pilot and command responsibilities. Question 22. Which chart or resource helps a dispatcher identify minimum safe altitudes for terrain clearance in mountainous areas? A. Sectional aeronautical chart. B. SID and star pages. C. En route high altitude charts. D. IFR area charts or grid MORA charts. Correct answer: D. IFR area charts or grid MORA charts. Explanation: grid minimum off-route altitudes MORAs or minimum sector altitudes MSAs on IFR area charts provide the lowest safe altitude that offers at least 1,000 ft, 2,000 ft in mountainous areas, clearance from obstacles. Dispatchers use these for emergency descent, engine out, or non-precision approach planning. Sectionals and high charts are pilot tools, and SID stars only apply near terminals. Question 23. An A320 is scheduled to depart ATL to BOS with one air conditioning pack inoperative under the MEL. Ambient temperature is 95 degrees F. What is a key dispatcher consideration before releasing the flight? A. Confirm that both cargo doors are operational. B. Ensure no thunderstorms are forecast along the route. C. Verify performance data reflects single-pack operation with temperature limits. D. Ensure the aircraft flies only below 10,000 feet. Correct answer: C. Verify performance data reflects single-pack operation with temperature limits. Explanation: when dispatching with an MEL deferred system, such as an air conditioning pack, dispatchers must validate performance, especially on hot days, where cooling is reduced. Air conditioning packs affect pressurization and ECS performance, and the MEL often specifies temperature limitations or altitude restrictions. FAR 121.628 and company MEL guidance mandate verifying this before issuing the release. Question 24. Which of the following is true about dispatcher fatigue per FAA guidelines? A. Dispatchers must rest at least 8 hours for every 24-hour period. B. There are no fatigue rules. Only pilots are regulated. C. Dispatchers may work up to 16 hours continuously with manager approval. D. The maximum shift is 10 hours unless the dispatcher is relieved. Correct answer: D. The maximum shift is 10 hours unless the dispatcher is relieved. Explanation: FAA Regulations 14 CFR 121.465 state that aircraft dispatchers may not work more than 10 consecutive hours unless relieved by another qualified dispatcher. Rest requirements are similar to flight crew in terms of operational safety. Fatigue leads to diminished decision-making capacity and is recognized by FAA human factors programs as a key risk area. Question 25. A flight from Den to C is airborne with an ETE of 2:15. Halfway through, ATC advises an arrival delay of 45 minutes due to congestion. The dispatcher notes remaining fuel will be close to minimums. What should the dispatcher do? A monitor until final fuel numbers arrive and decide later. B. Notify ATC that the aircraft will need fuel priority sequencing. C. Coordinate with the crew to initiate a diversion to a suitable airport with better arrival flow. D. Request direct routing to make up the delay. Correct answer. C. Coordinate with the crew to initiate a diversion to a suitable airport with better arrival flow. Explanation. Part 121 mandates that dispatchers continuously monitor fuel to ensure minimums are met, even with delays. If fuel drops close to final reserve, e.g., 45 minutes of cruise fuel, the dispatcher must act early. Waiting too long violates operational control. Initiating a proactive diversion ensures safety, regulatory compliance, and efficient use of time and fuel. Question 26. A NOTAM states, RWY 927 CLSD EXC emerge daily. What does this indicate? A runway 927 is closed permanently, except for emergency use. B. The runway is closed only for emergency landings all day. C. The runway is closed each day from 300Z to 1100Z, except in emergencies. D. Only taxi operations are restricted during those hours. Correct answer. C. The runway is closed each day from 300Z to 1100Z except in emergencies. Explanation. NOTAMs use standard ICAO formatting. This message means runway 927 is closed daily from 300Z to 1100Z, and during that time only emergency aircraft may land. Dispatchers must avoid planning operations during that window. Permanent closures would use phrases like RWI CLSD UFN until further notice. Question 27. A flight from Los Angeles to Honolulu is planned as ETOPS 180. One of the en route alternates has deteriorated weather below landing minimums. How should the dispatcher proceed? A. Remove the airport and continue the flight with just one ETOPS alternate. B. Cancel the flight due to weather. C. Evaluate an alternate route or airport combination that maintains 180-minute coverage. D. Advise the crew to file a request to enter NAT tracks for flexibility. Correct answer. C. Evaluate an alternate route or airport combination that maintains 180-minute coverage. Explanation. Under ETOPS planning rules, 14 CFR 121.633 and 121.161, dispatchers must ensure a suitable en route alternate is within the ETOPS threshold, 180 minutes in this case. If one becomes unsuitable, e.g., due to weather, a replan or reroute must be done to maintain continuous coverage. ETOPS flights cannot proceed if alternates don't meet the standards at the time of dispatch. Question 28. Under which condition must a dispatcher issue an amended release for a Part 121 flight? A. Any flight plan with a cruise altitude above FL 290. B. If the aircraft swaps to a different tail number than originally planned. C. When the aircraft crosses into a new ARTCC boundary. D. When the pilot changes radio frequencies. Correct answer. B. If the aircraft swaps to a different tail number than originally planned. Explanation. FAR 121.631 and FAA guidance require a new or amended dispatch release if any critical elements change, such as aircraft tail number, route, destination fuel or performance parameters. Swapping aircraft changes weight, MELs, and equipment, requiring updated planning. Crossing ATC boundaries or frequency changes don't affect the legality of the dispatch release. Question 29. Which tool is typically used by dispatchers and flight crews to share real-time operational updates? A FAA en route charts. B. VOR radial planning sheets. C. ACARS data link messaging. D. RAIM availability tables. Correct answer: C. ACARS data link messaging. Explanation: ACARS, Aircraft Communications Addressing and Reporting System, enables text-based communication between dispatchers and flight crews. It's used for routing changes, weather updates, and fuel issues. Unlike VHF or HF, ACARS allows secure, time-stamped messaging and integrates with airline operations software. RAIM and VOR data are planning tools, not communication systems. Question 30. A flight is planned to depart Toronto during active snowfall. The dispatcher notes the use of Type IV de-icing fluid with a holdover time of 25-45 minutes. The flight is 5 in line for takeoff. What action should the dispatcher take? A. Proceed as normal. Takeoff will occur within 45 minutes. B. Confirm holdover time compliance and coordinate with crew if it may expire. C. Wait until the aircraft calls for more fluid. D. Cancel the flight immediately. Correct answer: B. Confirm holdover time compliance and coordinate with crew if it may expire. Explanation: holdover time is the estimated protection window for anti-icing fluids. If the aircraft is delayed beyond the published limit, e.g., 45 min, a reapplication is required. Dispatchers must monitor conditions and coordinate with ground ops and the crew to prevent takeoff outside the safe window. FAR 121.629 and FAA's hot tables, holdover time guidelines, govern this process.